beginning of our summer cruise. Very unsettled weather at the moment, so we were going to go to Ireland. We've decided instead we're going to get south, get away from all these westerly and low pressures that are coming across the Atlantic. So heading towards Guernsey. So it's about a 12-hour crossing, less than that, maybe 11. And we've got pretty good conditions, to be honest. It's blowing about, well, it dropped a bit, but it's been about 15 knots on the beam. So we're reaching along very nicely, doing about 6.5, 7 knots. And we're about to hit the west-going stream of the traffic separation scheme. So big ships coming through, not as many as further up the channel, but still got to keep an eye on it. One reef in the main, cracking along, French boat ahead of us in the distance there, I think you can see him.
His closest point is just under 2 miles.
So that ship that's passed ahead of us is the MSC Hong Kong 5, 916 feet long, full of stuff from China presumably. So we're well clear of them. We're just keeping an eye out for any more ships coming, but it looks pretty clear at the minute, so that's all good. So we're using the tide as best we can on this passage. So although it's about a sort of, well, the main bit of it's 10 hours passage, we're going to get slightly more west going tide than east going tide. So we've left Dartmouth and we have allowed the upgoing tide to take us further up towards the east, and that's allowed us to kind of get close to the TSS, the traffic scheme. The tide will go slack in about an hour's time, just before 1, and then it'll start going westwards, and that will take us back down towards our target in getting towards Guernsey. The only downside of that is when the tide starts going westwards, it'll be wind against tide, so I expect to see the sea state get a bit more boisterous, and it's reasonably bouncy at the minute. So that'll be fun this afternoon, but we'll just have to live with that. Otherwise, wind's pretty good, wind direction's excellent, so we're doing okay. Just love having dolphins playing around with us. It's about the 3rd knot we've had on this passage. So the tide has changed now, so it's now going westwards. So we've done a big sort of loop out to the east, and we've cleared the traffic separation zone without problems, which is great. A few ships, but not that busy. And now we're beginning to curve back sort of westwards towards the southern tip of Guernsey, and as suspected, it's got a little bit more lumpy at the moment. We're into the beginning of that tide, so wind against tide, but it's not too bad. Glorious sunshine, so you couldn't really ask for more, really. I've had 2 reefs in the main for a while. It got quite boisterous for a little while, but it's back down to about 17 knots. So we've got 1 reef in the main, full foresails, nicely cracked off. We're about 6 degrees to the wind, apparent wind, and yeah, very nice indeed. So we've got Guernsey ahead of us in view, quite a low-lying island, and as expected the wind is kind of stayed pretty steady, but the tide is now pushing us in towards it, so it's made the seas a bit more bumpy, but we're doing okay. So yeah, all good. So approaching the south-west corner of Guernsey, and got a fair amount of wind against tide here, so you can see the seas are fairly lumpy. Visitors to St. Peter Port can go into the Victoria Marina, but it has a sill, so it's only accessible about 2 hours either side of high water. We were able to get in straight away, luckily, and we were surprised how empty it was, considering it was July. A couple of days of wet and windy weather gave us the chance to explore the island using the excellent bus service. Guernsey is a beautiful place, but for fans of modern history, the relics of the Second World War German occupation are to be seen everywhere, and many of them have been restored and looked after by volunteers. The Occupation Museum is a fascinating place, and it's the life's work of one man who, as a youth, started collecting remains and artifacts of the occupation and has created his own museum. These are some of the photos from his website showing the sort of things that are there. After 2 days of pretty relentless rain, we at last got a glimpse of red sky at night and the weather improved. There was a chance to see the beautiful castle cornet at the entrance to the port. Having filled Maunie's tank with duty-free diesel at about 90p a litre, we then had a short day sail across to the neighbouring island of Sark. There are 2 anchorages on the southeast side of the island, and we chose Sark Bay, which was really beautiful. From the beach you can walk up through the woodland up to the centre of the island, to the avenue, which is the main hub of a very small island of only about 500 full-time residents. Well, we've had a nice few days in Guernsey, although very, very wet for a couple of days. And then we had a day in Sark, which was interesting. It's a slightly sad place, Sark. It sort of feels as though it's sort of hanging on by its fingertips in terms of a place to live. Very reliant on tourists and looking a little bit run down in places, but beautiful, really unspoiled area. And then we're on passage down to Saint-Quay on the Brittany coast. We were going to go to Saint-Quay, a bit further to the west, to the east, but luckily when we wrote to them they said they've got a big sailing regatta which finishes there, and there's 2 days of partying and prize giving and so on, and they sort of hinted we probably wouldn't want to be there, so we're going to Saint-Quay instead, which is a big all-tide harbour. There's not that many of them on this coast, and there's a couple of big ones being built where they made the marinas further out rather than taking an old harbour and putting a dam in it, which is a lot of the old ones have. So that means we can get in at any stage of time, which is great. So it meant we left at 7 o'clock this morning, had a nice sail for about 2 hours with the parasailer. It then died, we ended up motoring, and now we've got the Irish flag up. And it's just a sort of, I don't know, 10-11 knots of northwesterly, so I've been reaching along, making about 5.5 knots, but we're in no hurry, so we're looking forward to it. We've been super impressed with the post-Brexit rules now. Of course you have to send a form in, anyway, so up till last year you had to clear in at some key major ports, and you had to take your passports and get them stamped and so on, which is a pain in the arse and was really hurting the sailing communities, because lots of British boats apparently just weren't coming, too much of a hassle. So what's happening now is they've got what they call a derogation. So these smaller harbours, we email them the form 24 hours in advance, they then stamp it with their marina stamp. They then email it to customs, who stamp it with their stamp, goes back to them, and then they email it back to us. So we've received our clearing in papers even before we arrived, which is pretty good. But yeah, just lots of bureaucracy as a result of good old Brexit. Who'd have thought? As we suspected, the marina's all tide access means it's not the prettiest place in the world, but really friendly staff, super welcoming, and all good. Not a lot of wind this morning, but we're heading up to Paimpol, only about 10 miles up the coast, and hopefully a bit more of an interesting place in terms of the old port than Saint-Quay. Interesting navigation, as we'll see.
Well, so we have the main sort of pan au chocolat, the Graham's choice raisin with some very nice surprise filling.
The old trading port of Paimpol lies at the head of a drying estuary, as you can see from this Google Earth image. But there's a deep lock which allows water to be retained in the two docks inside the town's walls. We arrived about an hour before high water neaps and had about 1.5 meters under our keel at the shallowest point. But we backed off here to allow a couple of large sailing ships to come out at the narrow point of the channel. We had to wait about 15 minutes for the lock, and unfortunately as the gates opened, so did the heavens, and we had to quickly don waterproofs to get in for the final approach. At each side of the lock there's a series of heavy vertical ropes which you can put your mooring lines around to hold you in place while the lock fills. And you're likely to have a small local boat coming alongside you. We'd assumed we'd go into the left hand of the two basins, which is rather larger, but we were called up by the harbour staff and directed to a very handy visitor berth right next to the Captain Air building on the left, where the showers and toilets are. So this is the entrance to Paimpol at low water. And this is spring, neaps, so it's not even spring tide, so it will get lower than this. So it's Bastille Day today, and so all the locals are heading down to the entrance to the port because there's going to be fireworks. Well, it's a good job this didn't come in last night with the fireworks. After 4 very enjoyable days in Paimpol, it was time to leave on the high water, and we locked out to head out up the very narrow channel towards the north, heading towards the beautiful Ile de Briha. We decided to head west into the Trier River and down to the port of Lézardrieux, which has a large modern marina and also has a pontoon berth in the middle of the river, which is not a bad call because at spring tides the tide flows through the pontoons quite quickly and it's a much easier place to moor. So this is the pontoon at Lézardrieux, which we came to yesterday. Slight change of plan. We had problems with our anchor windlass and it was extremely busy at the Ile de Briha, which is where we were going to go, so instead we came here. But we had a really quiet night on this pontoon. Beautiful bit of river. We're opposite the marina. We could have gone in there last night, but to be honest, we don't really need anything to walk ashore to. We can dinghy ashore, and this cost us €26 a night on the pontoon, including use of the facilities there, as opposed to something like 40, 48 to be alongside. So quite happy being here for a couple of nights while we start watching the weather to head back to the UK. The visitors' fingers are behind that yellow boat, which is a wind farm maintenance vessel. So apparently the new wind farm, which we passed when we came down from St. Peter Port, has brought some new financial gain to this place. So they've upgraded the marina. It was looking a bit tatty apparently in the late 2018s, 2019s. It's had a big rebuild, so we'll go ashore and have a look. And that's looking north towards the sea. So while we're here, we're going to have to swim underneath the boat because the prop feels very kind of weedy or barnacly, I'm not sure what, even though we cleaned it only about a month ago. Just going to have a look and see what it looks like. On a rising tide, it's possible to take a sailing yacht up the river to Pontrier via a lock. We decided to take the dinghy up just a short way. The whole trip probably takes nearly 2 hours. The Pont Saint-Christophe has been under repair for the last couple of years, and it's worth knowing that the air draft is 17 metres at Springs, so you have to know the height of your mast if you're thinking about taking your own boat up here. This is the inner marina, which is only available at Cabazzo this at a high tide. The yellow marks are basically a wall, and then there's a flap gate that allows you in and out. So this is only protected out of the tide, and then the main marina is out beyond it in the river itself, and then we're moored out on a long pontoon in the middle distance there. Very nice. So yesterday on the Trio River was a good day. We had lots of sunshine. In fact, I think I got slightly sunburned, and I managed to dive on the keel, and the most important thing was scraping all those barnacles off the propeller, which took a while, but it has made a huge difference to when we motored the boat afterwards. The cavitation and noise from the propeller is much less, and she feels like how she should do, so that was a good job. So our plan this morning was to sail around about 40 miles to a place called Treburden, to get a bit further west to give us a nice sailing angle to head back to possibly to Falmouth this weekend. And the thing we've learned about sailing is always plan to change your plans. And I had a pretty unsettled night, didn't sleep very well at all, didn't feel that good this morning, and as we set off, having just had breakfast, she promptly was sick over the side, and we hadn't even got out of the river, so she was definitely reacting to something. So quick review of the options. I could have motored around sort of single-handed and sailed around single-handed, but would have been no fun for Di, so we came back in and Di went to bed. I called the marina and said, could we actually get in here, and a hugely helpful guy said yep, and sorted us a pontoon, which is fantastic, and it's just right beside the service boats for the wind farm, which is just behind me. And I'm glad we did it then, because it's suddenly got quite busy. Of course, it's now Saturday, or Friday night into Saturday, so it's going to be obviously a busy weekend for the French yachties, but quite a lot of other nationalities as well, including a couple of really interesting looking British registered pilot cutters, which I'm going to have a look at a bit later. So the plan now is to look at the weather. We could go tomorrow, but it looks to me as though it would be a favourable direction, pretty much southerly or south-southwesterly, but a bit light, and we would struggle to make good speed. And it's about a 15-hour journey on, if we make 6.5 knots, and it could kind of eke out much longer, and of course then means you're into arriving at the night time, which is not much fun. And besides which, Di needs to recover her strength, having not eaten really for anything today. She slept most of the day. So what I'm going to do now, the plan is to look at the next window. Sunday looks not so good, northwesterly. Monday looks quite handy, southwesterly and a bit more breezy, which would be a nice reach. And I think we're going to probably head straight back to either to Plymouth or straight back to Dartmouth, but we'll just see what the weather's like. So it means we've got, the upside is another couple of days here in Lézardrieux. I've had a walk this afternoon, it's very pretty. I think the weather's going to turn a bit this weekend. It's not going to be quite as sunny, but still we'll have a good look around. Like a lot of sailors, we use windy.com to do all of our passage planning to really see what the weather's going to do over the next few days. But I've used this time the distance and planning feature, which is at the top right of the toolbar. Using this feature, you can set a number of waypoints. In this case, I've just used a very simple straight line between the entrances of the Trio River and the River Dart to show a passage distance of about 92 nautical miles. You can then select your mode of transport, boat in this case, and at the bottom in the red bar you can set your planning speed, which is for us 6 knots, and that gives us a duration of 15 hours. And then you can slide the days along the top there to get your start time to where you think you're going to leave. In our case, it was going to be 7 AM on the Monday the 22nd. You can then click along the lower figures and show each hour where you'll be, shown by the white dot on the straight line, and it shows you what the weather should be at that time. And in this case, pretty much consistent southwesterly, 14 to 17, 18 knots, gusts up to 22, and wind and waves up to about 1.8 meters at max. So pretty much for us a perfect forecast to get back to Dartmouth. It's just gone 7 AM on Monday morning, and we are en route for Dartmouth. Alarm going off, which is saying it's a waypoint just past our first waypoint. So we're coming out the River Trieux, stemming quite a bit of tide just to get us out. So we've got probably about knot of tide behind us, ahead against us rather. But nice day, it's a bit grey. Sorry to be leaving this area. Actually, we're going to definitely come back and explore more. We haven't had enough time to get around the coast, so we will do it again. But yeah, it's pretty impressive. So ahead of us to starboard is the Ile de Breha, and then we're following a fishing boat out to sea. And it's about a 14-15 hour crossing, depending on the wind. Forecast looks good, southwesterly all the way, 16-17 knots, so it should be a sort of beam reach, which should be nice. Might get a spinnaker up, we don't know, but yeah, we're looking forward to it. So it should be a nice, hopefully steady passage. We're a couple hours in, well, 3 hours into the trip, and we are humming along. We've got the orange flag spinnaker up, pretty much a beam reach. Wind's just increasing slightly up to about 15 knots, so just getting to the point where we're thinking if it gets any more we'll take this down and go back to just the Yankee, just for safety really. But also it's an old sail, that one, 27 years old, so I don't want to blow it. So but yeah, so far so good. The sea state's okay, about 1.5 meters of swell I suppose, so bouncing around a little bit, but otherwise alright. But yeah, we're doing about 7.5 knots, which is very good indeed. Well, as we expected, the wind has come up, and we got the spinnaker down in good order, so before it got too windy and too exciting, so we're under just Yankee as main. It's just grey really. Visibility is probably only about 3/4 of a mile, so we've got the radar reflector on. We have a one that is an active radar reflector, so it absorbs incoming radar from ships and pings it back as a big echo. So you've got our AIS on as well. So we're doing really well though. We're making sort of 7 and a bit knots, 7.5 knots, which is quite happy with, in the right direction. The tide has changed, so it's now, we started by going up towards the east and towards Guernsey, and it's now pushing us back westwards again. So we'll cross our sort of rum line shortly. We'll then get another east going tide later on this afternoon. flying sail. But grey and drizzly for a lot of it. And we're approaching Start Point, just west of Dartmouth. And can't see it. But we have got dolphins. I might see if I can get one to play for us. There you go, to order. Well, we may not be able to see any land, but it's always nice when you get your arrival to coincide with a bit of positive tide. So we've got, we're doing 8.5 knots over the ground, so we've got probably a knot and a half of tide with us, helping on our way. So we're not far from the entrance to the Dart, somewhere over there.